Baby, baby.
Hello, listeners. It's your boy NotoriousSA, aka Steve Anderson, aka Mission Accomplished. I was recording something last week about Afghanistan, but the situation on the ground changed significantly, so much so that we no longer have a military presence in Afghanistan. So I was going to publish something last week, but because the circumstances have changed, I kind of wanted to let things settle and then update it. So as of now, happy September to everybody. It's September 1st as I'm recording this. The U.S. military has now left Afghanistan. The story of how we got to this point is long and winding, but the too long did not read version is, you probably remember, the United States was attacked on September 11th of 2001. We responded with military operations in Afghanistan to try to root out Al-Qaeda, who was hosting training camps in Afghanistan protected by the Taliban. And of course, Osama bin Laden was the culprit we were looking for. That later turned into a war in Iraq. Then we got another president, and then some other stuff happened, and then we got another president who made a deal with the Taliban, and then we got another president who decided that I'm going to actually just try to straight up just end the war. And the resulting collapse of the Afghani government and the remaining people that are left, a lot of people are arguing if that was inevitable or not. There's a lot of bad faith arguments from people who are trying to attack President Biden unfairly, or trying to rewrite history of why there was a deal with the Taliban in the first place, or how when it was Trump being president it was fine, but now that Biden is president it is no longer okay. Even though the deal that Biden is acting on is the one that Trump acted on, which of course he could change, as he said he would with other policies. But if he wanted to get out of Afghanistan, wouldn't it have made sense to work with the plan that was already in place? And granted, it all went to shit with the airport. And you know what? People need to be held accountable for this. But I think there's a calculation in the Biden White House that the American public will not like what they see on TV. But now the troops are out, the story will shift. As I'm watching CNN right now, according to what they're saying is that the White House is going to shift focus away from Afghanistan, which of course they would. Why wouldn't they shift away from Afghanistan? The American public gave up on Afghanistan back in 2009 or 2013, depending on how you want to look at it, between electing Obama, who said he was going to end the U.S. involvement in overseas wars, which, of course, didn't turn out as expected, and then Trump, who said he was going to end our involvement in overseas wars, which, of course, did not turn out as expected. Now Biden's doing it, and I believe they know that the American public, unfortunately, has a very fickle attention, particularly when it comes to things like international issues. This will fade from the public's memory. It's unfortunate, and it says a lot about maybe more so human nature in general, but for the most part, if it's not directly affecting America, as in it's not in my neighborhood, or in my town, or in my state, or in the borders of the country, it's not really my concern. Even if there are Americans involved overseas, or American allies involved overseas, many people feel like the project is over and it didn't work. And no matter what we were going to do, it wasn't going to work And the important thing is that the American service members are home, and that we continue to try to help anybody who can or wants to get out still get out. Many people on the Republican side of the aisle, including myself, are suddenly trying to find themselves either in a, do I continue with what I know to be true, as in the importance of military involvement overseas for stability and protecting U.S. interests, or do I just jump on the Trump train and say, hey, it was good when Trump was there, but now that he's not there, it's all bad now? You know, a lot of people are just using these partisan attacks to say that Biden should resign or should be impeached or he's a liar or all these other things. Now, I'm not going to say anything about it being completely ironic, the fact that many people who defended Donald Trump every time, even over the stupidest and most obvious lies, now demand a very high standard of President Biden. And frankly, many in the media, this might be the first time they've actually had a higher standard, but they've already seemed to pivot towards going with what the White House is saying. I think many of the journalists who had spent the last 20 years in Afghanistan know the progress that was made there, and they probably feel betrayed that they made all these connections and met all these people and spent all this time there, and it seemed like it was for naught because the U.S. military left and the Taliban now has control. But unless we were willing to stay there forever, or have an international coalition stay there forever, odds are the Taliban was going to come back into power, considering the fact that they were in hiding in Pakistan, considering the fact that they have been supported by the Pakistani intelligence. It was only a matter of time. And when the Trump administration said, hey, it's going to be your country again, all I had to do was wait. In a year from now, when the midterm elections are really at their peak, in these last 2 months before what would be the next midterm election, do you believe Afghanistan is going to register on the voters' minds? Unless there is some major connection from Afghanistan to here, I don't believe so. In the same way that abandoning the Kurds and maybe in Iraq in 2014 and all the other international issues over the last few years that have played out, honestly, haven't been the determining factor for most people, because frankly, most people in America aren't really into international relations. There are people who are interested, and there should be, and of course, large parts of our government and businesses require international understanding and engagement, so it's obviously a good thing to have that. But politically speaking, if you think that Republicans are going to be playing images of what's happening in Kabul or what was happening in Kabul to try to paint the Democrats as, you know, people who won't defend freedoms abroad, that's not going to be the case. The only time they're going to use that footage is when they're going to say that these people, and that's going to be code for brown people, Afghanistani people, refugees, are coming to your neighborhood. And according to J.D. Vance, 40% of them, which I don't know where he gets his information from, and it's probably not true, says that 40% of them believe blowing themselves up is a way to solve disagreements, is that that's how it works here. You would just import people in and they would become suicide bombers. That's part of the reason this isn't effective, is that the American public supports bringing refugees from Afghanistan here. And the same people trying to hammer Biden as much as possible about this, and specifically focusing on Americans who are left there, are also saying, without any hint of irony, that we can't have any refugees here, that America's full. This, of course, being the same people who, when they were in charge, kept lowering the cap of refugees and basically tried to put a complete hold on it entirely. A very strong anti-immigration part of the party still exists. The same party that got Donald Trump a plurality in 2016 and helped propel him to victory at the national election, who took over most of the GOP, and now this sort of populist attitude of immigration has overtaken the more traditional legal immigration is good because skills are required that not all Americans have, and immigration creates a dynamic economy, but not everybody believes that anymore. Not to mention the fact that the former president, Donald Trump, has gone on the air and essentially proven to everybody why he is no longer president in the first place, is that he is also detached from reality and very much still insistent on his administration being the best thing that's ever happened to America, and convincing his followers and trying to convince the rest of us that the 2020 election was in fact illegitimate. And that sort of leads me to the main point here, is that while Afghanistan is what we're talking about now, again, a year from now, I imagine there won't be much discussion about it. The Republicans will probably want to talk about forming committees, and I'm sure some Democrats will too, but that's not the committee that people care about. The committee that you need to care about is the January 6th Select Committee, which is currently asking for lots of records from lots of people in lots of places, which means they're doing actual serious work. And the people who know that they're targets of this investigation, they know for a fact that it's bad for them. I wrote not too long ago about the connection between the Benghazi Committee that was created by the Republicans in the wake of the attack in Benghazi back in 2012, how that was turned into a political weapon to attack Hillary Clinton, and one of the key components of that investigation, later found out to be revealed after emails were hacked, was the use of a classified private server, which is something that haunted her all the way up until Election Day. So these committees can work. The Republican Party knows that they work, because when you can control the committee structure and the apparatus, and the other side's just going to say it's partisan either way, they are able to pull together facts and information that, while true, happens to be politically damaging to one candidate. Now, I'm sure many of them are going to try to turn Afghanistan into this similar situation, but it's not going to have the same effect. The reason being is that while these committees are going to talk about people in faraway places with funds they don't understand and international relations that most people either don't know or don't have the time to be invested in, everybody knows what happened on January 6th. The American public knows what happened because they saw it happen on live television. They saw it streamed over the internet. They see clips of it on Twitter and on Instagram and on Facebook and on Reddit and on whatever other website you want to use. We now know that many in the GOP are trying to retcon the insurrection by saying it's not an insurrection. Many pointing to a recent Reuters article which said that there, quote, wasn't a mass-scale coordination on January 6th. And what I think most people aren't understanding when they talk about that is, as far as we know now, was there coordination between the former President Trump, people who organized the Stop the Steal rally, and other big promoters of the Stop the Steal movement to actually engage in a process to stop the electoral count? Now, it seems clear to me that based on the charging documents, people, not a lot in the grand scheme of the people who were arrested, but there are people who wanted to get into the building and try to stop the count, which of course was followed by the mob of people, which was encouraged by the former president, who wanted them to stop the count, or use this as an attempt to try to stop the certification of Joe Biden's election. This is relevant because there are still people talking about violence. There are people who are convinced the election was stolen, and that therefore they can talk to election workers and other officials in a very detrimental, hazardous, and even threatening manner. You have people like Madison Cawthorn saying that he's trying to avoid bloodshed, but if it comes to it, he'll have to defend himself. Again, there wasn't any fraud. Madison Cawthorn, who is very likely a racist and just all the other terrible things you can imagine, is just trolling for attention and trying to become the new hot face of the Trump GOP. And frankly, that attitude may work in a congressional district in North Carolina, but it's not going to have a very far appeal outside of those very pro-Trump spaces. When people like Kevin McCarthy and Marjorie Taylor Greene talk about threatening telecom companies, and I probably should have mentioned this earlier if I didn't, the January 6th Select Committee has sent a bunch of records requests for numerous social media companies and telecommunications companies in regards to communications between the White House, President Trump, his family, and other backers of his about what was happening on January 6th. I can definitely see a bit of Denver Riggleman in there. If you don't know who Denver Riggleman is, he's a former congressman, guest on The Bulwark, intelligence specialist, veteran. Look him up. He is part of the committee. He's not a committee member because he's no longer in Congress, but he was hired to work for the committee along with other people as well. But you can tell that they're not messing around because they're going after the direct communications of people involved because they need to have an entire picture of what happened. And as I said earlier, we all saw the insurrection happen on television, and we see afterwards clips that come out from the Justice Department of video that was received either from online, from the perpetrators, or increasingly from police body cam footage showing police officers being attacked and berated and all sorts of the bad, terrible stuff that occurred there. The bigger question is, what was going on between the White House and people in Congress who were in touch with the president? People like Jim Jordan, who, despite bragging about his constant communications with the president, is very much hazy on exactly when he spoke to him on January 6th. People like Jim Jordan, who have been early boosters of election fraud going well into September of last year, before the election even occurred. And of course, when the election happened, and to the surprise of no one who knew what was happening, when Donald Trump lost, all of a sudden the people who were primed to say voter fraud said voter fraud, and convinced a large number of people that the election was in fact stolen. These are the issues that are going to be affecting people in the future. When you've dove into crazy like that, and I say this all the time to people who ask my opinion in a consulting manner, politically speaking, they want to engage with quote-unquote passionate, involved people because they think that is going to be their ticket to success in gaining votes and attention. And for a lot of people, maybe. But if they're crazy, if they believe stuff that's largely detrimental on a large scale in the long run, it can be a political killer. Particularly if you're in a place where the other party is in control and most of the people around you support the other party. Part of the reason it gets worse is that they may feel isolated and are tempted to go into these places because they know people there might support them. And all they have to do is just kind of pander to them, that masks don't work and you don't really need a vaccine and we're not really sure what happened with the election. All of this is an attempt to try to avoid directly confronting the issues there, but wanting the support of people. And unfortunately what's crazy is that in this day and age, unless you're 100% committed, the second that you turn around, the second that you think differently or have a differing opinion or have a moment of conscience, you are trash, you're derided, you're no longer part of the team, you're an enemy, you're a rhino, you're bad, you do not deserve a second chance, and a whole host of other bad faith arguments come afterwards. You see this between Ron DeSantis and Kristi Noem. Ron DeSantis is very much modeled himself after Donald Trump, where he's continuing to do things despite having no real legal ability to do them, like try to withhold salaries from school board members who enact mask mandates, and also trying to stop those school boards from enacting mask mandates, and also trying to tell a private business that they can't decide whether or not vaccinated people are welcome in their business, or whether they can ban unvaccinated people from doing so. Now this stuff is, centuries old case law, which, of course, old case law is always up for review when the circumstances are different, but they're not really that different. We have a contagious disease that we now have a vaccine for, and the only real protection we've had is masking and treatments and avoiding each other. Now the vaccine is out, and a large number of people have taken it. The majority of Americans have. But there's also a core group of people, for whatever reason, who have been hesitant about the vaccine, or just straight up refusing to take it, for partisanship, for spite, for whatever conception they have. That has been catered to by people in the GOP who, and the crazy part is, being an anti-vaxxer was a crazy liberal thing a few years ago, and now it's a crazy conservative thing. Because for many people, even though Operation Warp Speed was signed into law by President Trump, is a modern miracle for medicine, having thousands and hundreds of thousands of volunteers to test this vaccine to help end the pandemic early, and they want him to get credit for it, but they also don't want to take the vaccine because it's dangerous. And even when Trump said to take the vaccine, he was booed at a rally, quickly pivoting to, if you don't want it, it's your freedom to do so. And that's what this is about. Freedom. However, what do we mean when we say freedom? For some people, it's we want to not be vaccinated, not wear masks, and have everything be open as if there is no pandemic happening. That's not freedom. That's being selfish. That's saying that even though the circumstances on the ground are such where a communicable disease is killing people, and it's highly transmissible, and there are steps we can take grounded in science and legal precedent to help resolve it, political parties, individuals, governors and senators and congressmen all see a crowd that says no, and they want to jump in front of them, and they demand their attention, and they say they will fight for them. They will fight the mask mandates and the vaccine mandates, knowing full well they don't have the legal or scientific background to question it. But if they can cause just enough noise and get enough retweets and likes and shares, they might make some cash off of it, and they might get a couple media hits off of it as well. But all around us, we're seeing people say no more. They're not putting up with it. They're not letting the unvaccinated dictate their lives, which is good, because they shouldn't. the unvaccinated, those who are medically able to but choosing not to, the scale of it is keeping us from having the pandemic subside. Even though people are vaccinated, people are still dying from COVID. In Florida, even though the vaccine's available, there are more people dying from COVID than there were last year when there wasn't a vaccine. And now kids are getting sick. Previously, it was thought that kids didn't really get it as much, but now we're seeing that the new variants are starting to attack them. And nobody wants to go back to remote learning. There's also this group of people who refuse to have people be vaccinated or wear a mask. And you know what? It's multifaceted. There are teachers' unions that will not pressure their members to get a vaccine and will fight vaccine mandates. Lots of other unions are doing it too. There's a lot of hypocrisy going around everywhere. A whole lot of everybody needs to be part of the collective solution, but also not if it violates my convenience. Not my rights, my convenience. So if I'm in a union or I'm employed and I don't want the vaccine, I can just choose not to take it, even though I would get tested, even though it's their right to fire me if I don't get vaccinated. You know, there were so many people who got vaccinated for years. They went to school. They went to high school. They went to college. We all had to have vaccines to go to these places. This isn't new. We all have records of when we were immunized. And it's not as if the COVID vaccine is some huge radical change in how vaccines work. Sure, some of it's mRNA, but it doesn't change your genes and it doesn't have all of these terrible effects that people say. And the fact that people are choosing now to be vaccine skeptical, when I'm sure for years, up until recently, they didn't think twice about it, except for the very small percentage of populations that didn't. Now it's widespread. And you know what happened before when there were pockets of places that didn't get vaccinated? You had outbreaks of diseases we thought were eradicated. And guess what? Now, with a global pandemic happening and a vaccine that's available, a large number of people, for whatever reason, ethically, religiously, or if you medically can't have a vaccine, I'm not here to judge you for it. You know, if a doctor, your own doctor, and other doctors have said, try not to take it, or you can't take it now for whatever reason, I'm not here to stop you. But if your doctor has said, get the vaccine, there's no reason you can't get the vaccine, and you shouldn't, and you're not, and you're actively telling people to also not get it, you're part of the problem here. If I was telling people to not get flu shots, or not get MMR shots, or smallpox, or not get vaccinated for malaria if they were going somewhere, I would be giving them bad health advice and putting them at risk, and possibly putting other people at risk, because that's how you spread diseases. But you know, for the selfish people out there who just want to troll and who don't care about the public health or actual civil liberties when it comes to pandemics, it's just a matter of whenever the person I like is in charge, that's what matters, and whenever the person I don't like is in charge, it's no longer valid and I no longer have to listen. I hear talk radio hosts who haven't died of COVID after saying it's a hoax, saying that, you know, this administration is illegitimate. And they keep pandering to people who actually believe that this administration never legally won votes. Here in Illinois, we had a fundraiser in Rosemont, which is where we typically have the Republican fundraisers, with Dan Crenshaw. And sure enough, what happened? A viral moment comes out where he is confronted by somebody who says he has evidence that the election was stolen, and openly challenges Dan Crenshaw on that fact. Now, the same Dan Crenshaw who pandered to these people and signed off on a lawsuit to overturn the election will try to backpedal and say he doesn't actually believe these things, but Dan plays with the crowd. He knows what his crowd wants, and he's going to give it to them, even if he knows the rest of us can call him out on it. That's happening to a lot of Republicans, is that the crowd around them is telling them the election was stolen, he's not real, why aren't you doing more about it? And last year when Trump was still the president and there were elections to be made and money to be made and all this stuff, they were more than happy to dive into it and tell them what they wanted to hear, or pander and say that there's still legal challenges playing out, but maybe something will happen. Well, guess what? They were sold a lie that Trump could win, could reverse it, or legally change the results. Then we're told that the reason that he lost is because of fraud, and then we're told that nobody in a position of authority took the fraud seriously, so now that there's an illegitimate government in Washington. This is a real thought among thousands, if not tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands, or possibly millions of people in the United States who, despite all the evidence that's available, does not believe in the legitimacy of this government. Because former President Trump made all these baseless claims about election fraud and convinced a bunch of people to say it out loud. On a personal note, it's been very frustrating to see so many people who did the right thing get punished, and so many people who have been selfish doing the wrong thing to avoid consequences or be rewarded for that selfishness. And there's a lot of hypocrisy, a lot of bad faith arguments all around, which I know I've already said, but it's worth stressing because I think a lot of people have taken the online persona of the contrarian troll who exists only to oppose whatever they don't like. Many people have taken that as, that should be my real personality in real life, or that should be my political strategy, or that's my ideological framework, even though that's not what it's for. And before you say anything, yes, if you follow my social media, NotoriousSA Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and on all major podcasting services, you'll see that I've engaged in my fair share of trolling. Sometimes people deserve to be trolled because they are being bad faith actors. Some people have very bad takes, and some people want to spread bad misinformation. It can be very difficult to feel like you're alone in an island of sanity in a crazy world, but you're not. You're not alone. For a lot of people who just want to live a normal life, they were tired of the Trump years, they were tired of the crazies on both sides, they were tired of the pandemic, they were tired of everything, and they just voted to have some sort of normal, functioning world that we can live in. And unfortunately, too many people have decided that their freedoms matter more than anything else. And they keep saying the word freedom, which I know, I said earlier, is just another word for selfishness, because true freedom involves responsibility for your actions. Like, you're free to act, but you also have to accept the consequences of your actions and your speech. For many of these people, it's, I don't want to wear a mask and I don't want to get vaccinated, but if I do get sick, I demand to have medical attention, and the idea that my medical needs would be pushed aside because somebody else is sick and I need to be in an ICU bed, it just goes to show you that they aren't thinking in terms of, a rational framework. It's a me first strategy where I don't like it, so it's bad and doesn't exist, but if it does happen, I demand immediate medical priority. And look, we shouldn't be in a position where we're telling people they don't deserve medical treatment because they didn't get vaccinated. But if you're not getting vaccinated and you're in an ICU bed and you're taking up space from somebody who needs something else not COVID related because they got vaccinated, one would think that kind of selfish response would trigger people to get vaccinated. And hopefully it has. I don't know how many deathbed confessions of "I wish I was vaccinated" to be heard before people realize that if you don't get vaccinated, you are gambling with your life. Not to mention, by being out in public places, not wearing a mask, and not vaccinated, you are risking the spread of the disease. I'm not a disease expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I think most of us are well aware of the steps that we've learned over the years, whether it's learning about the influenza epidemic of 1918 or seeing what other countries have done with SARS and with Ebola. You know, it's not as if this is a whole new thing we have to figure out. It's a disease, right? It's a disease we're trying to prevent hospitals from being overwhelmed from and from killing people. And the key to eradicating this disease, and not necessarily eradicating it, but to have it be sort of out of the sphere of pandemic, endemic, and into a controlled setting, is getting people vaccinated and stopping the spread of it. But because people are choosing to lose their jobs and get fired and not go to school and be disassociated from their family, not because they medically don't need a vaccine, but because they're choosing politically to not get one. You know, when 30% of the country is doing that, that is enough people in enough places for it to spread. And it's killing people in mass numbers. Again, after we have a vaccine available that's free, that you can get pretty much anywhere, that they even offer to come to your door. And yet these people kept attacking them. And they're mad that lockdown measures are being considered, and mad that their kids have to wear masks and they have to wear masks. Well, did you ever wonder, maybe you're part of the problem? That maybe I'm just one person, but if me and 10,000 other people around me don't get vaccinated and don't wear masks while a pandemic's happening, we might spread disease amongst us that is deadlier and mutated and more contagious than the previous one? Honestly, I'm not sure what the title of the podcast of this episode is going to be. It might just be me ranting. It might just be me talking about Afghanistan and vaccines. I was going to try to break it up, but I decided not to. I've been trying to make stuff happen, and, you know, things don't happen. And now that it seems like we're sliding backwards into the pandemic, you know, as jobless aid is ending, and as people are getting crazier and attacking medical professionals at school board meetings for merely explaining that masking people who can't be vaccinated is a good idea to help reduce the spread of the disease. Too many people have been allowed for too long to be selfish and get away with it or be rewarded for it. Not advocates of personal freedom with appropriate amounts of responsibility, but advocating a selfish, childlike, my rights and freedoms are the only thing that matter, and if you get in the way, I will not hesitate to violate your rights and or engage in violence to get what I want. Even if I lose fair and square, even if the science isn't on my side, if the public isn't on my side, even though I have the right in America to live as a minority of thought or whatever, right, and not have the government generally come after me, there are people who think that not only does that no longer apply, but I have to actively be engaged against people I don't like, because if I don't, they're going to, even if they're not. The idea that they might do it means that I have to do it. That's how you get the Flight 93 essay. That's how you get the Federalists and American Greatness and all these other places who just defend Trump and contrarianism, regardless of if it hurts them or their own ideological consistency or their lives. And it just once again shows that the particular quirks that humanity developed to evolve in the modern day that we live in can result in situations where we have fractured information spheres, and there's significant overlap in people who believe that COVID isn't real, or it's overburdened or overplayed, and the election is stolen, and Democrats eat babies, and other Republicans hang out with the Democrats who eat babies, and etc., and etc. And lots of people who have very paranoid thinking about governments wanting to institute forever masks and forever programs. As if we're all not trying to just not live in a world where deadly infectious disease is still spreading everywhere. As if we're not trying to just have COVID be another disease that we could vaccinate our way out of. As if we've done it before. And then we see what happens when these people decide that they're selfish. And this goes back to something that I've said before. Something I learned a long time ago, and I realize now that some people took it intuitively. When I was told that there is no such thing as a wrong opinion, but there are wrong facts, he taught people that their opinion can't be wrong. And as long as your opinion is never wrong, you can always find some sort of quote-unquote facts to justify your opinion. And you know what that opinion could be? I like mushrooms on pizza. It could be, I think the U.S. should stay in Afghanistan and build a military base. Both of which are seemingly controversial topics for some reason. And of course, the idea that I'm allowed to go out and live my life as I see fit, as long as I'm not violating other people's rights. Well, what do you think happens when there's a pandemic and you're out there not taking steps to protect yourself and other people, actively saying the pandemic isn't happening, and actively spreading misinformation that can cause harm to other people? What did you think was going to happen? And for many of them, that's the whole point. They want to provoke Twitter and Facebook and these other social media sites by spreading misinformation and getting kicked off and saying, look, you see what I mean? They censor me. This is a violation of my First Amendment rights, which is not how the First Amendment works, mind you. Whether it's Facebook, whether it's Arby's or some other private business you're in, if you're out there spouting nonsense, they're allowed to ask you to leave and not come back and not be welcomed here again. I know people think that social media is this giant public sphere where you can walk in and say whatever you want, but that's not the case. You can walk into the public right now. You can go on the sidewalk with a sign. You can say the election was stolen. You can say all your medical misinformation. Frankly, no one can stop you. The government's not going to stop you, at least. But if you want to do it on a social media site where they're pretty clear about what rules they're enforcing about misinformation and other aspects of their policies that, this isn't always some weird, like, my pictures got flagged for the wrong reason. It's people saying masks and vaccines don't work, getting banned, saying, see, look, they don't want you to know the truth. Even though it's not the truth, it's your opinion, and it's medically wrong, and they had every right to kick you off the platform because that's what they're allowed to do. And you can go to a different social media platform, might not be as big or as good. That's the way the cookie crumbles, my friend. That's the free market. Too many of them have decided that their individual feelings, despite years ago saying facts don't care about their feelings, now saying my feelings are the most important thing that matters, regardless of fact, constitutional law, or even my own practical safety. I'm caught between angry and frustrated, disappointed and nihilistic. You know, what are you supposed to do when you hear somebody who said that COVID wasn't real, it's a hoax, that what they're trying to do to stop it is more dangerous than the disease itself? What do you do when people who say that unrepentantly for months all of a sudden get sick and die? Sure, you can be sad about it. But if someone said drinking and driving wasn't a real problem and they drove drunk and got killed or hurt someone else, what are you supposed to think? You know, I posted on Twitter not too long ago that I was tired of people who were trying to game the treat others the way you want to be treated scenario, where they demand respect from you, for their crazy ideas and their nonsense, right? But if you criticize them or call out their ideas as dumb, they say you're being disrespectful. They say you're the one in favor of censorship. They say you're the one who's in favor of totalitarianism. And then they just turn around and go back to their supporters and say, you see that? That guy's against me. That guy's for totalitarianism and authoritarianism. And it's like, no, I never said that. I just said your opinion on vaccines does not match what the evidence said. What I'm saying is you can't just look at Afghanistan and say it's all Joe Biden's fault without at least acknowledging the other 3 administrations who were involved in it, and particularly the last administration who made a deal with the people that were trying to leave or trying to get out of Afghanistan or trying to control Afghanistan. You know what I mean? It's become far too easy to engage in bad faith, because I think the internet, unfortunately, allows for that. While it does allow us to communicate in good ways, and it allows us to connect with places that are excellent free thinkers who want to engage in well-reasoned debate, the same system also can perpetuate this kind of toxic, childish nonsense that if an algorithm feeds onto it, it dives people in, and that's how you get video after video of QAnon conspiracies and anti-Biden memes and pro-Trump memes. And if you dive into that side of Twitter long enough, you can start to feel crazy because you just see people posting stuff that's obviously lies or not true, which again, Twitter's not real life, so you shouldn't spend too much time on it anyway. But it can affect your real life, and the information that's spread on it can affect other people. I guess what I want to say is that I hope to all of the brave service members who served in Afghanistan, I want to say thank you for doing a job that most Americans wouldn't, and the American public gave up on long ago, but you guys were still there. To all the people who helped evacuate anybody that we could get out, welcome. I hope they all come here soon. They'll be great Americans. To all the people who are trying to say that Afghanistan is entirely on the Joe Biden administration and Trump has nothing to do with it, you're being dishonest. Those of you who are supporting Joe Biden, saying that there was no better way that could have been handled, I'd say maybe, but you know, what are you going to do? They've obviously decided this is going to work. And frankly, hey, they may learn from the last administration. If you just double down and never backtrack, people begrudgingly respect you somehow. I will also say that the January 6th committee is going to do more work. And I look forward to seeing the reports they have. And I hope that they are able to complete their assessment before a possible GOP takeover of the House in 2022 because I know for a fact Kevin McCarthy is going to try to squash this committee if he becomes Speaker, or if any Republican becomes Speaker. They're definitely going to quash it. But not before they get the information out there. And you know what? In some ways, it seems like the tide is turning because a lot of selfish people for too long got away with it. And I think it's because of the very top of the American government, the very person that we saw every day, whose tweets we saw, word for word, and people talked about how they knew him and they talked about his desire. There was a standard set for selfishness and a low bar, and whatever Donald Trump did was good, and whatever anybody else did was bad. If that's the bar we've set, then Joe Biden's going to clear it for the American public, which, as much as people tried to have it clear for Trump, they couldn't because he was his own worst enemy. But if they can know that some of the techniques he used work, including doubling down and not apologizing and, trying to take responsibility but also blaming everybody else in the process, that if you have enough people who agree with you, then what are they going to do about it? Nothing. They can't do anything about it. They can be mad and throw a hissy fit, and Eric Erickson and all these other people can talk about how they believe that Joe Biden, this thing is worse than anything that happened in the Trump administration. And you know what? That's just bullshit. It's just bullshit. Granted, it's only been 1 year into the Biden administration, barely, and Afghanistan has fallen apart, which we all thought it was going to, and he's the man in charge. But to pretend like it has nothing to do with the previous president, and that the previous president is immune from all of this, is just another bad faith argument. I hope the people of Afghanistan, whether it's the remaining people in their anti-Taliban alliance and all the other activists who have been there over the years, can fight back whatever way they can. I really hope they can. I am concerned about what happens if ISIS infiltrates the area, because as we saw from the attack on the airport, if the Taliban has their own enemies to worry about, then it's about to get far more complex. If Al-Qaeda was an ally of theirs and ISIS is not, if ISIS is in there saying we're going to mess some shit up and the American government won't be there to stop it, or have troops on the ground and we're relying on the Taliban to stop it, there's a whole lot of concerns that go with that as well. It should be noted, the American public should care about what happens to the refugees and should care what happens afterwards, but frankly, my guess is that they won't. My guess is that they're going to forget about it, and they're going to be focused on domestic issues going forward. And frankly, the pandemic and the economics of the pandemic are probably still going to be the dominating factors for the next year. Things can change. I don't know for certain how much they'll change, but I do know that things will get better. They were getting better, and sometimes we slip. That happens, but things will get better. I say it to myself because I say them get better. I don't know, quantitatively, all the tools are there for it to get better. I may not feel it in my own bones some days, but I know things will get better. I know the people who are engaging in bad faith now will likely not be remembered in the future as somebody worth remembering. We'll remember those who did the right thing years from now, and we'll look at those who were part of the wrong thing, and hopefully they've repented or redeemed themselves, but not everybody can, and not everybody will, and not everybody wants to. And that's the thing about America, is that people get to live their own lives. Up until they start affecting the lives of others in a way that possibly threatens them. And not in a vaccines or a mask threatens my freedom way. more like a disease threatens my life from people who won't get vaccinated or wear a mask kind of way. Like people who think we should have just left Afghanistan as soon as possible, but now blame Joe Biden for leaving Afghanistan as soon as possible, while also saying we're not going to take anybody from Afghanistan who's going to help us because we're just importing Democratic voters. It's sad it's gotten to this point, and I hope in the future that it gets better, but at the same time, it's probably going to be rough for the next couple of months. But who knows? The future, I'm cautiously optimistic about it. I believe between the vaccine mandates, troops coming home, and people no longer letting the disrespectful run the show, that we are on the path to better days ahead. So if you're still here, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you listening. Seems like more of a rant than it is a coordinated episode or anything. I don't know. I haven't really felt inspired to talk much about anything. If you haven't read my latest article, it's about the census maps in Illinois. The legislative maps based on the census data that came out. When I wrote it, they had originally passed a series of maps using 2019 ACS data, and I showed how that was different from the actual 2020 results. They've since changed that. I'll probably write an update to it later, but for right now, I'm just recording this. So, ladies and gentlemen, and non-binary, and whoever else is listening, I promise the next episode will be a bit more organized, be a bit more cohesive. This is more so just had to get some thoughts out, and I appreciate anybody here who listened, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. And make sure to wake me up when September ends.